There's two types of people in this world, and they're both good people. You have the group that gets up every morning, they go to work, and that's okay. They're trying to provide for themselves or family. But then you got this other group, they get up and they go to war. Every day they get up, they're going to war. And if you watch a soldier in war, he's not just fighting for his country. They may say that. He's fighting for everybody in the trenches with him. And he's trying to save the lives of others, not just his own life. And he's willing to make that sacrifice. And to be in this type of business, you've got to be willing to make a sacrifice for others and keep your eye on the ball.
Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Kevin Connors. Welcome to another episode of Connors Clinic Live podcast. Today, we have a special guest, my friend, Mike Tigchelaar, and he is a special guest for me because we use his equipment fairly exclusively for our patients. And we really have to keep him healthy because we're dependent upon him. So, but I want to get him talking about how he started using the Rife machine, how he got into frequency therapy, and how he started this company. I want to give people a lot of confidence because we've been using Mike's equipment. I was trying to think of this, Mike, when I bought my first F-117. Gosh, it had to have been like 2010, maybe?
Yeah, I would say at least a dozen years ago.
Right? Yeah. At least that. We used them mainly in our office for a while. I've told other people the story of how we got to where we send everybody home with a Rife now. But this is going to be about Mike. And so let's just jump into this. I want to talk to you, Mike, about how did you get started in this? It's such a weird thing for somebody who's not maybe a medical professional to get started into.
Dr. Connors, I've always been interested in alternative medicine and things like that. But back in 2003, I was seeing a doctor named Dr. Gary Collar. I think he's retired now, but he was out of Zeeland, Michigan. And he was trying to help me with some of my issues. And he had acquired a Rife device. Back then it was called a Beam Ray. And he couldn't figure out how to run it. I was building a website for him as well. So he says, hey, why don't you take this home for a couple of weeks, see if you can figure it out, run it for a while, see what it does. So that was my first contact with it. But at the same time, I was doing research because I was building his website on the history of Royal Rife and frequency delivery. So I got the system home. It was, for its time, it was pretty advanced. It was a computerized system, but it was an old DOS type system. And
that was our first Rife machine too, was a Beam.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So they had this big bulb up there and everything. And so I had a few friends over and, we saw some good results with that. I was pretty amazed, and it's stuff you couldn't placebo. But at some point I had to return it. Well, back then that device, I think it was around $6,000. And so I called the company. I ended up with the owner on the phone, and we began talking. But we had different backgrounds culturally at the time. And my background was musician. And his background, I found out later on, was used car salesman. So we both approached this culturally differently. And I'm not intend to be critical of the owner, because culture affects how we determine what we do or what we don't do. But in the musical culture, people don't realize this. Musicians never pay for music. They only pay for hardware. And it's just an unspoken word. If I know a song or I know a piece, I share it with you, you share it with me. We don't buy music. If you know something, that's how I get it. And I know something, that's how you get it. But we always pay for hardware. The amplifiers, the instruments, all that's always paid for. That we understand that. But new music, no, you don't pay for it. That's not the culture.
That's part of the art. That's the art of music that you're sharing.
It is. Exactly. And so when I'm on the phone with the current owner at the time, I says, well, Lynn, I says, how do I get new songs? How do I get new music or new programs from you? And he says, well, you buy another machine. And I says, Lynn, I pretty much put it this way. I'm not going to spend $6,000 on another grand piano to get another version of Chopsticks from you. See, that's not my culture. And he says, well, used car salesman, look, if you want new features, you got to buy another car. See, so this is a clashing of different views of matter. So I hung up the phone, and at that point I decided I need to build my own instrument because I need something that's not only programmable, but upgradable. And I don't want to have to go out and buy something brand new every time with that kind of money just to get one or two programs. So I found another company that actually sold a board. I still use that company that actually had a computer on board. It was programmable, it was flexible, and it was upgradable. And I began working with them. I only ordered a machine with the intent that I was going to own my own. I had no intent that this would become a business or I would share this with anyone else. And so I got the thing finally working with the help of a relative of mine who had more skills than I at the time in electronics. And I began running it. And then another doctor friend of mine, he's a dentist, he says to me, he says, hey, I'd like one of these. I says, well, you can have mine. I'll build myself another one. So he got the first one. He still has it. And I tried to get it back from him, but he won't let me have it. So he says, no, you're not getting this one back. This is number one. So regardless, at that point, then other people began calling, and I eventually went from owning my own to over a few years, several hundred people had my device.
So what year was this?
This all started in 2003, and I would say somewhere around 2006, 7, 8. Somewhere at least by 2006, there was quite a bit of devices out there. So I went back to the board maker, and he began customizing my program to make it unique to us. I paid him to do that. So the first thing we added was what's called an update frequency button. And this is what makes what we do so unique, because now you're part of our culture. When you own our device, if you want new programs, you simply click update frequencies and it downloads all the new things, all the new changes for free. You never pay for it into your system.
Can I stop you there 1 second, Mike? Because I want to clarify this, because this is really important to me and our patients. When I write a program for a patient, that doesn't get changed when you update frequencies. But just in the last couple years, okay, we're talking near the end of 2022 right now, with all this COVID stuff going on, you've had multiple coronavirus programs that with that frequency update, now people got that additional program to use during these crisis type situations. And that was just such a huge blessing to people.
Right. And we're at our 13th edition. In fact, we just released the COVID variants, I think it's called B4, B5 program. That was actually donated by a spinoff company that only develops custom programs for our users. They donated it to us. But we have over 5,000 users, and many of those will donate programs. Not all of them by any means, but when we get something new and it's tried and tested, for example, we had a doctor call, he's a fairly new client of ours, and he discovered some research that went back 10 years. But this stuff, it has a way of disappearing, getting buried. And there were 4 or 5 proven frequencies in this very long article and study that was done that indicated they had some positive impacts, for example, against cancer. And when he first sent it over to me, I'm a pretty busy guy, and I'm looking at all this stuff. And then he calls me, and he says, hey, did you get that article? I says, yeah, but I didn't see anything in there I could use. He says, well, yeah, there's 4 or 5 frequencies in there for cancer that were discovered. I says, really? So I started looking at it closer. And within an hour, those are added to our cancer sets for our general cancer programming. Yeah. And then we release a critical update to all of our users to say we have a critical update now, and we tell them what the program is that was updated, so they know what to look for. And some of those folks need it, some of them don't need that program, but that's how it works. And here again, people aren't charged for this.
So they have that extra frequencies to use for their family if they need it. And
that's
then it's
right.
a huge, I mean, it is like a community of people sharing and trying to help other people get better. That's what life's supposed to be about, right?
Exactly. And see, once we start the culture, they're getting things, they're not paying for new music, as I call it. And when they discover something, they give it back to us. Nobody's asking to get paid.
Right.
And that's the culture we created. So I'm not a used car salesman. You don't have to buy another car or another device or another instrument to learn another piece of music. We're going to keep giving you new music. And as a result, the device that you purchased, say in 2013 or 2012, 10 years later, is actually better. We at one point had 350 programs. There's now over 2,400.
Yeah.
And we keep finding new ones, or we're adjusting the current ones. And so we've done some massive updates through the years as well to improve the functionality and the output of the device. And here again, this is phenomenal. For example, I own a Tesla. The car I bought in 18 was better in 2022 because you get free updates that improves the functionality of the vehicle. That's the culture over there as well. It's very similar to what we've been doing for years.
Yeah.
So, but it makes a huge difference. We get feedback as well. We have a few really good people that are frequency sensitive. They'll tell us what's working for this month's cold and flu. And generally speaking, that's if it's non-COVID, it's pretty good for about 4 to 6 weeks, whatever they find out. So I think yesterday we released the 2006 fall program. It's an old program that seems to be working, and a 2018 program. You just run them back to back. So my son just called, for example, this morning on his job, some guy coming sick. It's non-COVID, got him started. And we loaded up that program, and virtually we just stored it inside the machine. So he don't have to even plug it into a computer. He flips the switch and it'll run it for him.
It auto run.
Yeah, it'll just auto run. It's incredible. And that's another unique feature, because what we've developed, even though you use your computer to send the information over there, our device is a lot like a printer. Once you click print, the computer's not doing anything anymore. It sent that information to the device. And instead of clicking print, you click run on our device, and it prints that data into the frequency generator, which has a computer on board. And most of these generators are sold, they don't have a computer on board. There's no computer chip. They're relying on that device to continue, whether it be a handheld device or something else, to continue to feed that information in. They don't run standalone. And this virtually, you could put a program in. We do it for nighttime sets. Maybe you've done this with some of your people. We have Amish people that don't own computers, but they're struggling with something. We'll load the set in, ship the machine to them, flip the switch, and it'll run for 6-7 hours. We stack the programs they feel they would need.
Right. That's actually how I run my cancer program, is on an auto run. I just put my frequencies in one program, stacked it, and then just put it in an auto run because I'm lazy. So
I do all mine that way. I run off a desktop and I walk in the office, load it up. That's how I do all my programming. Yeah. So
I want to talk about right now we're using the F122. We have a number of patients that have an F117. You had something before that, an F110?
There was an F110, and if you really go back far, there was what was called a T150.
Okay, so I've never seen either one of those. So I started utilizing yours when you had the F117, either 2008, 9, somewhere around there. I actually have one of the first ones I bought from you.
Right.
I still use, we have two at home. So I typically use the F122 that I got from you a couple of years ago, and when you first came out with those. And then I still have that one of those first F-117s that we use at home on a Windows 7 computer.
Right.
And it works perfect. We have never had one issue with that machine in 13 years. And, my wife uses that, all the time. So it's just, they're very hardy unless you're dropping the thing or something.
Right.
They're pieces of electronic device you got to be careful with, but we've never had an issue. And we traveled with those too, carried it in the suitcase, wrap it in a towel or a sweatshirt, and we just never had a problem with it.
Yeah. And the thing about our device, because I dealt with engineers through the years, and I'm not an electrical engineer. I tell people, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a mad scientist, But engineers, they're not trained on high voltage. They're trained on either, if they're electronic engineers, they're on low voltage, or if they're electricians, it's 120, 240. Yeah. So an F-122 runs at its peak about 1,800 volts, and your old F-117 runs 1,200. So when I was developing this product, if I talked to an engineer, it was always, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, because they're looking at things from a much lower voltage. And they're in a box, unfortunately. Most of them can't think out of the box. And so finally, I just had to get rid of these people and just, here, I'm ordering these parts, we're putting them in, let's just see what happens. Because you have no technical guidance they would give you other than no, it will not work. And in reality, things do work. One of the latest releases that came out about a year ago, and it's something you don't have to have, but some people want it. It's called a jackhammer. But I came up with that idea 3 years ago because there are individuals that want more range, but they cannot afford the higher output bulb. Now, the idea was there, but I couldn't develop it. I couldn't figure out how to do it. But it always sat in the back of my head. And about 6, 8 months ago, I finally, in my mind, I figured out how I could do it. How do you up the output of this bulb 256 times? How do you do that? You talk to an engineer, they're going to have some very expensive gadget. And they'll spend months developing this thing with all kinds of schematics and prints. I grabbed a piece of plastic and a piece of metal, a screw and an alligator clip and a wire. And the first test, I actually had jumped the output over 500 times, but the machine smoked in about 10 minutes. It was just way too much. So I had smoke coming out of the hyperdrives. But I had it figured out, but how do you figure this out with a piece of metal, plastic, an alligator clip, and a wire? If you saw inside the actual unit, it's a very simplistic way I do things. But this is the upside of not being an engineer, because it's like a paper clip. It's so simple. But an engineer who's been trained, and he can't think of simplicity. It's always this complexity to get something resolved. And they're in that box. But, it works. It works incredibly well. We had to test it for about 2 or 3 months to make sure we wouldn't fry anything. Is it a necessary thing? People ask me. I said, well, probably not. But there's always people who, they're not happy with a Corvette. They want a Ferrari. They want a Maserati. They want all the speed they can get. So we have devices here for that kind of culture that feel they need everything maximum. And so we have those devices. But here again, in the development, it doesn't happen overnight. If you saw my product, if you took off the hood or you opened up a jackhammer, you'd say, well, that's simple. And it is very simplistic, but nobody realizes the amount of months or years it took to figure it out.
Yeah.
How to do it that simple, you know. So
that's one of the things I tell people. What I love about you and your company, TrueRife, is that you're constantly innovating and researching and developing with the idea of the outcome in mind of how we're going to help more people.
Right.
Trying to keep your prices down all the time, trying to make this reasonable for people to be able to have one in their home. Tell us about your company itself. You just moved a couple of years ago? Was it to a different building?
Time flies because I think it's been at least 8 years now.
Oh my God.
So at one point, this was actually in the basement of my house. And now we occupy a building that's about probably at least, I don't know if it's 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. We got a big warehouse. You'll see a picture of it on the About page on our website. But when COVID hit, we went wall to wall. It got scary. Fortunately, I was smart enough at the time that I had a lot of inventory, but within a matter of 2 weeks, they about wiped us out. But we were still able to deliver. There has been, as you know, supply chain issues, but I have a huge investment in stock over there that I keep all the time because is you see and you know and I know, we're not selling shoes. We're fighting for people's lives.
Right.
And so, you know, a shoe salesman, if he runs out of the shoes you want, big deal. But if I run out of a simple component and I can't finalize the product, this is more than me not making the sale. This would result in individuals who need this product, I feel, to have an impact on their health and their life and their family's life as well. And so, you know, I lost a lot of sleep. I know you have too. Anyone that's in this situation will. But I tell people there's two types of people in this world, and they're both good people. You have the group that gets up every morning, they go to work. And that's okay. They're trying to provide for themselves or family. But then you got this other group, they get up and they go to war. Every day they get up, they're going to war. And if you watch a soldier in war, he's not just fighting for his country. They may say that. He's fighting for everybody in the trenches with him. And he's trying to save the lives of others, not just his own life. And he's willing to make that sacrifice. And it's just how we're built. There's different people. And to be in this type of business, you've got to be willing to make a sacrifice for others and keep your eye on the ball. That this is about helping others, not just profits, sales, things like that.
Well, and my staff fully know that because they're all in the boat with that, with me with that too. It's like you just never turn off because it's always a fight. The powers that be, the three-letter organizations out there are constantly trying to destroy us. And it just is what it is. And if you're not willing to fight that fight, I used to teach seminars to doctors, and it's like, if you're not willing to fight that kind of fight, then just don't even think about trying to treat cancer patients or use Rife or try to help these really critically ill people, because it's not the same as a regular practice. It's just
no. It's a totally different. And here again, it goes back to your culture again, how you were raised, and some of your genetics of where your head's at. You know?
Right.
And some of us are willing to take risk, and if you're going to be in this business, you're at risk.
Yes.
But at the same time, can you sleep at night knowing that if you don't take the risk, somebody could die?
Right.
And that's something that you just can't, some of us can't get it out of our heads.
Well, and you can sleep. I sleep very well at night because when I just think of the patients that are still alive that were supposed to be dead months, years, decades ago, that are so thankful that, you know, they found this type of therapy. So I just want to thank you. Well, I want to have you back on our programs. TrueRife out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. I've been to your TrueRife conferences and spoke at them many times. I don't know if you're planning on doing any of those again, but you just get to the point of overwhelmed with trying to keep up with production.
Right.
And, we just try to keep people educated as much as possible. So thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll get an invite out to you to get back on, and we can get I really want to get into some of the technical stuff, because I'm certainly not a physicist, and you develop these. So I would like to get into the different scalar waves and the carrier waves and that kind of stuff, fun stuff that people are interested in hearing as well.